Is a prophecy here on Israel National Radio, the Messiah Hour, as simulcasted on YouTube, and you can email me messiahhour@gmail.com. Yesterday was the Shloshim anniversary of the terrorist attack in Har Nof. There was a prayer group at Kever Rachel, and here to talk about that is a rising star in Jewish activism, Shira Nussdorf. Shira, how are you doing out there?
Good, thank God. Thank you for asking.
Sure. So tell us what exactly it was like yesterday. I'm sure it was very, very emotional. Tell us some of the things that happened there.
You know, it's interesting that you would say emotional because it was a trip for women, and yet they were so strong and so unified and so grounded in what needs to be done for themselves personally to start building and moving forward, and for the Jewish people.
All right, and I understand there were speeches. In the second part of this program, we're going to play one of those speeches. I want to know that the people who attended, what was their mindset going in? What was, if they were trying to accomplish something or they were trying to express their emotions, what was the mindset of the people going?
There were women of all ages and various degrees of religious backgrounds. The bus itself met at Neve Yerushalayim, which is where Rebbetzin Heller, whose son-in-law was one of the victims of the attack, teaches. And so it was really beautiful to see some of her students want to support her and want to learn more about davening, as a lot of them are Bali Tshuvas. They're learning more about being religious Jews. And there were women from Har Nof who were some of the friends and neighbors of the rabbis that were attacked. And there were women who had just heard about it from places like your show. Thank you very much for letting me on the other day to promote it. And it was really all about hearing the message of positivity that Rebbetzin Heller had to say and wanting to do something proactive to not feel like victims. And what Rebbetzin Heller talked a lot about was that our response time and time again to tragedy is to build. And she actually spoke about whether or not it's insensitive to talk about moving on so fast after something so heinous like this has happened. It's been 30 days. And the question was, is it appropriate to talk about having a Hanukkah party even? And she said that that's one of the things that we can look at from the Torah and learn. This week's Torah portion talked about, or rather last week, talked about what happened after Jacob was in mourning when he thought that his son Joseph was eaten by a wild animal. And it talked about Yehuda, who was one of the brothers who did something proactive. He said, wait, maybe we shouldn't kill him. We should put him in a pit or sell him, rather. He said we should sell him. And his next move was to go and get married. So she looked at that, and she looked at how the Jewish response to the Holocaust was. You know, we just came out of a time of great slaughter and massacre of Jewish people. And right after that, Israel became a state, and a natural Jewish response was for people to get married and trying to continue our faith. And so she talked about building, and the goal of the women there were to support those victims and to build through prayer.
And can you tell us some of the prayers that were said at this prayer event?
A lot of Psalms. Looked at the beautiful poetry of King David and what he wrote, and one of the things that Rebbetzin Heller spoke about was that here was a person, a king, a figure that had such an incredibly hard life. Here King David was attacked by his own family, his sons, different people within the nation, and he was trying to be a king. And instead of being upset or angry at God and saying, look, I'm a good king. I'm a leader of the Jewish people. Why are you making my life harder? He wrote beautiful psalms of poetry saying, the whole world seems to be against me. You're the only one that I could turn to. Please help me. I see your beauty. I see your truth. I want to be strong. And that's the person that we connected to. We connected to King David Melech, and said, during this dark time, please, God, help us come through. Help us be strong. Help us show your glory when it seems that so much pain in the world is making it dim.
Again, you're listening to Is It Prophecy here on Israel National Radio, and the show is simulcasted as Messiah Hour on YouTube. You can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com. We're continuing the conversation with Shira Nussdorf. Now, Shira, a lot of times when people pray at the graves of Tzaddikim, they feel a certain energy or a certain level of spirituality. I want to know what you felt davening at Kever Rachel.
To be honest with you, Ari, I didn't even have that much of a chance because I was running around talking to the different women, trying to get their perspective, trying to tape record them or hear, because I knew that you'd invited me today. And my prayer, honestly, to God was, look, God, as a servant of you, you see that my first priority is always to put other people first. And I went and I touched the tomb of Rachel, and I took pictures. And I had a quick prayer, but I wasn't able to pray in the same way that the other women are. And one of the things that we spoke about before was, what are we as women responsible? Firstly, I'm not obligated to pray and to say the Psalms. And I'm a proactive person that created a venue by which 50 women could go and pray. And I really would have liked to pray because I want to add light. I want my prayers to count. I want to get a husband and a family. And maybe it's a flaw in my character that I try all the time to make sure that other people are served first. I'm working on it, and I pray that God gives me the strength to sometimes take a moment and stop and focus on myself. And honestly, I plan to do that when I light the menorah tonight. It's a mitzvah for women to light the menorah, even though it's a time-bound mitzvah, and to just stop and stare and look and reflect a personal prayer to God during the lighting. And it's known that the time that you pray when you're lighting a menorah is the time where you can focus and center on yourself and pray for the miracles to happen. And one of the things that I heard today in a Torah class was that when we light these candles, we're not commemorating a miracle that happened a long time ago. We're connecting what happened, the miracles of what happened long ago, with the miracles that we see here every day. Yesterday, a plan to attack people in Tel Aviv was intercepted. The news reported that a Palestinian woman dressed up as a religious pregnant Jewish woman, had a suicide bomb taped to her stomach and was planning to go to Tel Aviv and not only blow up innocent people, but soldiers at that. Her plan was to go onto a bus. They had rented an apartment. And so the fact that itself was stopped yesterday is a miracle. And one of the things that Rebbetzin Heller spoke about was that, whose merit is that? Is it because of your miracle? Is it because you prayed? We don't know. And so when we pray and when we see the miracles and when we could see something like that, like an attack that didn't happen, we could say that was a miracle. And we don't know why or why we deserve that sort of miracle, that sort of saving, but we recognize it and we want to see more of them.
For sure. Definitely want to see more miracles. Now, what's interesting is this was a women's group only, women prayer only. I know we talked a little bit last week about why that is so powerful, women's prayer, but for those who are tuning in and didn't hear the interview last week, tell us a little bit more about that concept.
It's a concept in terms of how women's prayers unite, and it's not just a woman's prayer versus a man's prayer. Something that I heard today in the Torah class with Rebbetzin Friedman was that our prayers are connected and that they go through Jerusalem. She actually said that when you pray, no matter where you are, all over the world, the prayers sort of attach themselves onto the prayers of the Klal, of all of Israel, and the prayers of the tzaddikim, the righteous people who are living, and they sort of funnel through to Jerusalem, to the Kotel, to the Western Wall, and right up to Shemayim, to heaven. And so it's not about the prayers of a man versus the prayers of a woman. The concept of why men pray together is because we can't depend that every single word that we have is going to be said with kavanah, with such deep feeling. It could be you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei and the phone rings and you don't get it, but you're distracted for a minute, but maybe the other person didn't hear it and isn't distracted. And so the idea of people praying together is a concept that we all believe in, whether it's men or women. And Rebbetzin Friedman even said today, if you would pray at the same time when men are praying, your prayers are connected to them as well. And that's why we know that prayers from Jews and from people who are non-Jewish, any prayer is heard, and they're connected around the world. And so it's something really proactive that people can do. They can channel their energy and pray with the names of people who are still hurt in mind, but that every single prayer counts, and they are all connected, and they are all heard. And since we're not God, we don't know which prayer is answered at what time and what it means. We can just know that by praying, we're channeling our positive energy into doing something constructive. We're recognizing that there is a God in the universe, and that our sustenance depends on Him.
And we were talking a little bit last week at the Hineni Shir. I think men view God as kind of on Him and more of this is a struggle. Women view more with God. Can you talk a little bit more about that difference?
I really can't say how a man views God. When you and I were having a conversation, you said something very interesting. You talked about God in terms of putting physical, I don't know if you said restraints or physical boundaries. You talked about the tefillin. You talked about the talis. Men seem to be putting physical parts of God's mitzvahs onto them. Right. What did you say about that, Ari?
Well, that tefillin is interesting, that a man has to put on tefillin, he's required, a woman is not, and that it's such a almost a military type of way. The tefillin has to be put on a certain place, it has to be done at a certain time, and people have to stand a certain way, the men have to stand a certain way, etc., like at attention. So I just found that interesting that the Torah has it set up that way for a man, and then with the women it is not as militarized because, like you said, there isn't time-bound mitzvot and commandments.
One of the things that makes me so proud to be a woman is that we really are expected to bring the light. We light the candles. We light the candles on Shabbat. We light the candles also on Hanukkah. It's so nice. And it's a beautiful idea that our prayer and our physicality in terms of bringing light into the world is something that's physical, that is also spiritual. Like, how can you can't touch light. It's a physical thing. You can see it, but it has almost like a spiritual or transcendence effect. And I think that's one of the powers of women, that women use their mouth and their ideas, their bina, their neshamas, their souls to sort of bring light into the world. And this holiday of Hanukkah, one of the reasons why women are obligated to light the menorahs, even though it is a time-bound mitzvah, is because women were so instrumental during the days of Hanukkah in terms of saving the Jewish people. So while it might not be a physical thing, the women weren't in the army, the story of Yehudis certainly tells us that women do have the ability to have a physical responsibility and a physical response to darkness in the world. Do you know the story of Yehudis, Ari?
Actually, I was about to bring that in. Go ahead and tell our audience about that, because women have a very special role in general, but Hanukkah as well. So tell us a bit about the story.
It's an amazing story. Yehudis was a woman that took a big risk in terms of seeing what was happening with the Greeks dominating, coming into Jerusalem, coming into Israel, and trying to oppress the Jewish people on a spiritual and mental level. They were trying to take away our ability to have Brit Milah, to have a bris, to light and keep Shabbat, and to honor Rosh Chodesh, the start of a new month. And Yehudis, a woman, said, no more. We have to have a plan. And she went to the rabbis and she said, I have a great plan. Pray for me for the next 3 days. And people thought this is a crazy plan. Like, what are you planning to do, Yehudis? You are a single woman by yourself. What's your plan? She said, you pray for me and keep me in mind, and I have this plan. And what Yehudis did was she went to the general of the Greek army, and she said to him, listen, I know that Jerusalem is dependent on water in order to have sustenance. I want to tell you all the secret tunnels and the best way to destroy the Jewish people by cutting off militaristically the water supply and where exactly you can break into the city of Jerusalem. And, of course, the Greek leader was very excited about this. Yes, I want to know. She said, I'll tell you, but in 3 days, because I have to go and pray to my God, and I need to spiritually cleanse myself and to make sure that God will allow me to tell you this. Let me come and go for 3 days, and I could, go to the mikveh, and I could pray, and after 3 days, I'll tell you the strategy. And she was granted this wish. And for 3 days, she walked by herself through hundreds and thousands of Greek armed soldiers back and forth, and everybody would watch her, and they would watch when she went and prayed. They watched this woman by herself go, and she went with her little basket. And on the third day, because she had been coming and going, the man, okay, now tell us what's the battle plan, but I'm in love with you. I've been watching you for 3 days. You're such a beautiful woman. I want to have you. And she said, sure, no problem. You can have me. Let's celebrate. Let's have a little wine. Let's have a little cheese, and then I'll tell you everything. And she gave him the wine and cheese, and he fell asleep. And when she was asleep, she took his own sword, and she cut his head off, and she chopped him into pieces. She put his head right back in the basket, and because they were alone, because all his soldiers and guards thought that he was about to take advantage of this Jewish woman, she walked back. She had the head of the basket. She walked back, and she walked right through the hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and she went right to the city gates of Jerusalem. And when everybody saw her coming, they couldn't believe she was coming. She had made it back. And they said to her, "What happened? How did you survive this?" And she pulled his head out of the basket, and they took it, and they decided what they were going to do is they put his head on a spike on the city, and all the Jewish people came with pots and pans, and at sunrise, they banged their pots and pans, making large noise. And when the Greek army woke up and saw the head of their general on a post, and heard this tremendous rumble of noise and all the reflection of the sun on the pots and pans, they just ran away. They didn't even fight. This single woman had defeated the entire Greek army, and the secret of her success was the prayer for 3 days, that she knew that it was a crazy plan, that she was one woman, that there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but that if she had God's strength behind her, she could do it. And that's really the spirit of what we plan to do, or what we did when we went to go daven. We said, Rebbetzin Heller is one Rebbetzin, and Shira Michal Bat Fega Blima is one girl, and Miriam Adani is one girl. But we want to pray. We want to pray for the strength of the Jewish people, and we want to inspire other people to do that too, because we've seen throughout history the power of prayer and what women could do when they unite together. They can defeat an army in a physical or a spiritual way.
Again, you're listening to Is It Prophecy here on Israel National Radio, Route Sheva, and the show is simulcast as Messiah Hour on YouTube. You can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com. Shira, noticing what happened yesterday, the turnout and all the emotional prayers that were involved, how do you think this is going to affect prayer in general among the Jewish community in Jerusalem?
I know that the 50 women that went yesterday really felt strong. I know that they got momentum to keep going. I hope that the spiritual energy that it caused within the heavens will have a butterfly effect, and that people will want to pray. I hope that anyway people are praying. I know that because of Hanukkah, for the next 8 days, people will be lighting candles all over the world and praying, and hopefully we'll be sitting down for a half an hour to pray and to reflect on their lives and what they could do proactively to make them better, and how they could, if they have emunah, if they have faith in God, He'll help and work in a partnership with them. So I anticipate that regardless of my personal prayer or lack thereof yesterday, that there will be a tremendous amount of prayers all over the world, and that can only have a positive effect. One thing is, when people are praying, they're not fighting. When people are praying, they're not speaking lashon hara, they're not gossiping. When people are praying, they're not stealing. So if people would actually light the candles and pray for a half an hour, that could have a tremendous positive effect for either that half an hour, or if it has an effect on them because they realize that they're connected to the Jewish people all over the world, it'll give a sense of pride and confidence that we will continue to do and exist and pray for the miracles that we see every day.
Have you thought in general about going to a grave of a tzaddikus every month maybe, or some specific set of time, even if there's not a tragedy? Obviously, we hope there isn't a tragedy again, but just a set period of time to do this again.
That's a great idea, Ari. You're welcome to fundraise with me for it. And the wonderful thing about living here in Israel is that the graves and the holy sites of our tzaddikim and our rabbis are all over the place, and it just really makes you feel strong in your Zionism to know this is our homeland. Even though I made Aliyah last year, that people and Jews have been living here for hundreds and thousands of years, and that when I go and visit these holy sites, I feel more and more connected and more responsible for maintaining my homeland. And that doesn't mean I'm going to pick up a gun, God forbid. It means I'm going to live here. It means hopefully one day I have a family. It means I'm going to, if you invite me back, continue to let people know of great events happening all around Israel, or if people would call in and let us know what's going on around the world. So monthly visits would be great. And whether somebody's able to go to the site of a holy person, or whether they're praying in their house when they wake up and they say, Moda, thank God I'm alive, it's always important to pray. It helps center you, and it does help connect you.
All right, really quickly, you mentioned about me fundraising. I don't think I'm going to be doing that, but what I want to know is what expenses are needed to do something like that.
Well, I'll tell you, yesterday, the trip only cost us 20 shekel, which is like $5. We had to go actually in an armored bus. it's in the city, it's right near the city of Bethlehem. And you would think that going to Bethlehem, especially during this time of the holy season, would be something that people would want to do around the world if they're Jewish or they're not. Unfortunately, it is a dangerous place for us to go to because on the way, on the road to Bethlehem, are Arab villages that are hostile. And I pray for the peace that next time I want to go, I don't need to go and hire a bulletproof bus in order to get there. I had a friend of mine who wanted to come with us and she wasn't able to make the bus and she said she just didn't feel safe driving by herself. That particular place of the tomb of Rachel near Bethlehem is dangerous and it's really unfortunate. There's plenty of places. I go to the Western Wall. I was just in the Old City about an hour ago that we can go to. And, you know, the beautiful thing about going to a holy place to pray is that it actually doesn't cost any money. If you need to take a bus there, and the bus costs $6, so that's really the price. And it's an amazing thing. If you wanted to go to a rock concert and see your favorite band, that would cost you money. If you wanted to go to a movie, that would cost you money. But to do something as holy and important as praying, that really isn't money. And so when I talk about...
So there you go. You guys could do it once a month. It doesn't cost you any money.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, we wanted to give presents to the soldiers. So giving a menorah to soldiers, everything costs and everything in Israel costs. It's one of the fun things about living here is that customer service is sometimes less than the best, but the more people who make Aliyah and show the Israelis how to put a smile on your face, that's always good too.
That's right. That's why we need a lot of American Jews to make Aliyah. So what we're going to do now, again, this is a prophecy at Israel National Radio, Arut Sheva. On YouTube, you can find it under the Messiah Hour. You can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com. We're going to take a quick break right now, and then on the other side, Shira's going to tell us a bit about Rebbetzin Heller's speech that she gave at this prayer service yesterday at Kever Rachel. And then we're going to actually play the full speech. It's about 18 minutes long. It's very, very interesting. So that'll be on the other side of this break. This is It Prophecy here on IsraelNationalRadio.com.